This presentation about Therapeutic Alliance Model becomes visible because of the conglomeration efforts of Dela Cruz, Diesta, Eusebio, and Francisco. At the end of the discussion, learners are expected to learn what is Therapeutic Alliance Model. To better grasp the topic, we have divided the content into parts. The first one would revolve around background knowledge, followed by the introduction. Then, its three essential elements would be emphasized, followed by the Therapeutic Alliance Model itself. Then, we're going to define how to achieve therapeutic relationship or working alliance. The next 5 content will revolve around how to avoid therapeutic alliance structure, importance of therapeutic alliance, its conclusion. We also have the list of references and the index of members. The next 5 content will revolve around how to avoid therapeutic alliance structure, importance of therapeutic alliance, its conclusion. We also have the list of references and the index of members. To start the discussion, let's talk about the background knowledge. So, welcome to the timeline knowledge. In the year 1912, we have here the name Freud or Prude, and he is the one that introduces the idea of therapeutic alliance. So our topic is therapeutic alliance, and this idea and this whole concept came from this guy. Again, his name is Freud or Prude. So he defined the terms transference and counter-transference. So let's define these terms. To better understand it, let's take them one by one. Transference is an emotional reaction of a client has to their therapies, meaning when they first saw their therapy, what is their first impression, okay, to the healthcare provider. Next, how about the counter-transference? So this is also an emotional reaction, but this point of view revolves around the therapist's reaction and feelings towards the client. So these two phenomenon have negative impact on the therapeutic relationship or on the alliance if it's not properly addressed. Okay? Again, when we talk about transference, ito yung reaksyon ng pasyente, ito ang kanyang first impression sa ating healthcare provider, specifically sa ating case ay isang therapist. Pag sinabi naman po natin counter-transference, ito naman ang emotional reaction ng isang therapist sa kanyang kliyente. Okay, now let's move on the year 1951 and where we have the guy named Rogers. So, sino si Rogers? Si Rogers ay ang first man who emphasizes empathy na pivotal characteristic daw siya ng therapeutic alliance. So, empathy, that is a common term or common trait here in nursing. So what does this mean? It means that we should put ourselves into the shoes of other people. This is very important for us as a healthcare provider to consider the feelings of each of our patient. So just like Roger, we in the nursing field emphasizes the empathy. Okay? But the first one who emphasizes empathy as a pivotal characteristic of the therapeutic alliance was no other than Rogers.
And in 1962, Anderson et al. Acknowledged empathy and rapport as positive attributes of the therapeutic bond. And in 1994, Hogarth combined previous relevant information on therapeutic alliance into a conceptual structure with 2 branches. So what are those 2 branches? Personal relationships and collaborative activity.
Now, let's move on to the year 2000. We have here 3 names, Martin, Gorski, and Davis. These 3 persons specifically define therapeutic process or alliance as a collaborative and effective relationship between therapist and patient. When we say collaborative, meaning that the decision is not only based on the therapist or the healthcare provider, but also we are encouraging the patient to give their own comments. So those are the people that is included in our timeline knowledge. So you better remember all these people who contributed these terms, this knowledge, this idea, so that we can better understand what is therapeutic alliance. Let's move on to introduction.
So for the introduction, let us know what is therapeutic alliance. Therapeutic alliance, also recognized as the working alliance or the helping alliance. It is essentially a way to encapsulate the relationship between an individual or client and trained healthcare professional. It focuses on patient-centered needs and concerns. It is considered an influential determinant that can even impact how well a patient responds to medical treatment. in particular, whether the patient will be able to fully recover from a specific condition with ease. So, the Therapeutic Alliance refers to the idea of a strong productive relationship between therapist and client. This bond can take countless forms and will look different for everyone, but the basic idea is that both parties feel comfortable doing their part in the work toward the client's therapeutic goals. Within therapy, the Therapeutic Alliance also serves as a framework for disagreement and even argument. Progress is sometimes depend on the client's ability to articulate concerns about the therapeutic process or on the therapist's ability to push the client outside of their comfort zone.
Okay, now let us move on to discussing the three essential elements of Therapeutic Alliance. So, in a broad sense, Bordy 1979 conceptualized the notion that a collaborative relationship between a client and healthcare provider comprised of three components. First is the agreement on the goals or the collaborative goal setting. Ito ay nakadepend on the presenting problem ng client during the first visit or consultation. Dito ay focus kung ano yung dapat ma-achieve ni client at the end of the therapy or treatment. Second naman is the agreement on interventions or shared decision-making, which is dito pag-uusapan ng both client and healthcare provider kung anong mga steps, methods, and techniques ang need i-implement para ma-achieve ang mga sinatilang goal. And last naman is yung development of personal bond made up of reciprocal positive feelings or the therapeutic relationship. Ito yung matuturing na crucial element among the three kasi dito napapasok yung trust and confidence ng both client and healthcare provider toward each other. Ito yung magdidikta whether the goal will be able to achieve or not. So, the mentioned three essential elements are deemed necessary to overcome destructive behavior that without a doubt hinders attaining physical and emotional wellness of the client.
So, the next thing that we're gonna discuss is about the Therapeutic Alliance Model. So, on this slide po, we have the model for the Therapeutic Alliance. So, it compares the components of compliance, adherence, and alliance. It is also an interpersonal framework in which the educational process is highly collaborative between the patient and the healthcare professional rather than compliance-based. And lastly, the educator and learner establish an alliance with the goal of self-care in mind po. So, to simplify the model po, so dito po sa Therapeutic Alliance Model, meron po tayong dalawang participants po dito. Yung patient po natin and yung care provider po natin. So, on the first circle po, we can see na mas maliit pa yung gray shaded portion ni patient and mas malaki pa yung white shaded portion ni healthcare provider po. It just manifests na hindi pa kaya ni patient na makipag-cooperate agad or stand alone during the dependency period since mas dominant pa ang provider. On the second circle naman, step by step or little by little, nagkakaroon na po ng healthy rapport during conforming and mas lumalaki na yung portion na nasasakop ni patient habang nagiging dedicated and committed na siya sa binibigay or ginagawang therapy or treatment po ni healthcare provider. And lastly po, on the last circle naman, makikita po natin na na-achieve na yung Therapeutic Alliance na may goal na self-care. May equal power na rin sila na gumawa ng actions para ma-achieve yung optimal health ni patient. So nagawa na rin po ni healthcare provider na matreat na rin si patient po. So mutual na po sila rin. And hindi na rin dependent at kaya na rin mag-stand alone ni patient.
Moving on to some behavioral patterns that will and will not lead to achieving Therapeutic Alliance. Let's begin with some positive behaviors that definitely work in establishing a therapeutic alliance. First, we have here active listening. When the healthcare provider establishes this kind of behavior, maglilid ito sa mas sincere connection with the client. Take note that this kind of communication skill is a beneficial tool to establish trust and positive rapport as it conveys openness and respect with the client or patient. Next naman is privilege the client's experience. This is considered advanced empathy. About to sa pag-acknowledge na ang bawat individual na magpapakonsult ay special with unique personality, style, and preferences. Dito dapat ipakita ng healthcare provider na invested siya to help the client in any appropriate and possible way. Then we also have here the requesting feedback and ensuring positive remarks. So while communicating with the client, kailangan gently and calmly lang natin sila i-approach. And as much as possible, avoid criticism and judgments to be able to achieve best treatment success. Next are empathy and genuineness. Kapag naramdaman ni client ang behaviors na to sa healthcare provider na kaharap at kinakausap niya, mas magiging comfortable siya to open up. In other words, these communication behaviors will lead to overcoming the alienation and isolation that the client experiences. And lastly, we have here the goal consensus and collaboration. It basically concentrates on the agreement of both the client and healthcare provider to goals and treatments. This to promote a meaningful source of healing for the client.
Kung kanina ay what are the behaviors that can work, ngayon naman, what are the behaviors that does not work. So una, meron tayong confrontation. So confrontation can be abrasive and ineffective when it is not done in an empathetic way. The client will feel like they are being attacked. The second one is negativity. Therapy can often be helpful for changing negative thoughts. So, as a therapist, we should avoid negativity. Next is assumption. Assumption will damage our capacity to relate to others. If you are always assuming, you know how others think and feel, and you stop listening. Also, assumption refers to just kind of assuming the therapeutic relationship is going well. Next is centricity. Privilege the client's expressions. Last is rigidity. When the therapeutic relationship is rigid, there will be lack of agreement on goals, a lack of willingness to understand the client, and avoidance of the client. This can lead to clients losing trust and rapport, as well as feelings of poor self-worth, resulting in insufficient assistance for the client.
The next topic revolves around avoiding therapeutic alliance rupture. So this is categorized into two, momentary and permanent. Momentary, as defined, is the breakdown in understanding or trust on either side of healthcare provider and client. What do we mean by this? So momentary, I'd like to think that it is our first impression to the person. From the word momentary, pwede siyang mabago as time goes by. So pwedeng ang first impression mo sa tao, mabait siya, pero pagdating ng time, pwedeng sabihin mo, ay hindi pala. Pwede namang ang first impression mo sa kanya, maldita siya, pero kapag mas nakilala mo siya, ay mabait pala siya. So momentary lang siya at hindi siya permanent. So ito daw ay dinedefine as breakdown in understanding or trust, meaning may tendency talaga na mawala yung trust natin sa isang person. So meron tayong two point of view here. Yung point of view ni healthcare provider, paano ba siya mawawala ng tiwala sa client? So kapag during the assessment, yung subjective na sinabi ni patient hindi nagtutugma sa ating objective assessment, ibig sabihin lang is nagsinungaling tong si patient, and mawawala na doon or magbe-breakdown, mawawala nga po yung understanding or trust ni healthcare provider. So paano naman po sa other side kung saan si client naman yung mawawala ng trust? So kapag nagtanong siya ng kanyang condition sa healthcare provider and hindi siya masagot nito, dito is ma-feel niya na hindi niya ako naiintindihan. Pero as time goes by, kapag naman nasagot na siya ni healthcare provider, pwede magbago yung kanyang perception, pwede magbago yung feeling niya. So that is what we mean by momentary. Nagbabago siya. Pag sinabi po naman nating permanent, it is when the client starts to feel more and more that the healthcare provider doesn't have their best interest in mind. Ibig sabihin nito, it progresses na po na hindi talaga siya sinagot ni healthcare provider na nag-result na ayaw niya ng ang mag-treat sa kanya is itong doctor na to or itong nurse na to, and eventually pwede siyang mag-request ng another healthcare worker na titingin sa kanya. So again, we have two ruptures and therapeutic alliance that we should be avoiding: the momentary and the permanent. Now, let's shift our focus onto the importance of therapeutic alliance. Opens the discussion of demand and concern without personal judgment or condemnation. Once we have built yung therapeutic alliance or napagkakatiwalaan na tayo ni patient, hindi niya na may isip na i-judge natin siya. So this is very important kung ikaw ay isang therapist, kung saan gusto mong malaman ng kalagayan ng isang person, not only physically but also mentally. When they have opened up kung ano yung totoong struggle nila, hindi nila iisipin na i-judge lang ako nito ni doc or ni nurse. So next importance is that it addresses to heal mental, emotional, and psychosocial aspect of pain. Just like what I have said, we don't just focus on the physical aspect but also on the holistic perspective of a person. Next, it leads to a better therapeutic outcome and effectiveness. So, once the patient have opened up to us, mas mapoprovide natin yung quality healthcare sa kanila since alam natin yung kanilang problem and alam natin kung paano ito i-address. Aside from that, magiging effective siya since makikipag-collaborate sila sa iyo kung paano ka makakapaggawa ng intervention, paano ang magiging diagnosis. So, nandito papasok na mag-a-adhere sila and may motivation sila para sumunod.
So now we have reached the conclusion for the Therapeutic Alliance subject matter. Based on the image of the Therapeutic Alliance model presented on your screens, it is evident that this type of treatment results in patient-centered care. Throughout the phases of the treatment, Both the patient and healthcare provider shared equal power and responsibility in working toward a set of specific goals while acting in positive behavior and manner, such as showing empathy, understanding the situation, and being aware of the sense of care needed. Just remember na obtaining optimal therapeutic alliance will only be feasible if ang client at healthcare provider ay nagkaroon ng common denominator in terms of beliefs and goals. After mutual agreement on that specific goals, dito na papasok yung commitment nila in devoting their time and effort to fulfill objectives. Afterward, both the client and healthcare provider must have a repetitive interaction para malaman yung most suitable treatment strategies to be implemented. Kapag nanatili na nagpo-progress and straight line yung teamwork between the client and healthcare provider, magkakaroon na ng domino effect which eventually leads towards the path of conclusion and termination where both client and healthcare provider is autonomous and independently living their healthy life.
So here's the list of our report references. And for the index of members, Dela Cruz Nicole Andrea, Diesta Shanice May, Eusebio Alexandra Lian, and Francisco Andre Johan.
And that's our presentation regarding the Therapeutic Alliance Model. Thank you for listening and note that we are open for questions and clarifications.